For 42 years, George and Jenny Sodder refused to believe their 5 children had died in the Christmas Eve fire of 1945. They hired private investigators, put up billboards offering rewards, and followed hundreds of leads across the country. Because they knew something the authorities wouldn't admit, their children's bodies were never found in the ashes. Someone had taken Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty. And somewhere out there, the Sodder children might still be alive. If you're fascinated by unsolved mysteries that refuse to stay buried, make sure to subscribe because this case will challenge everything you think you know about official investigations. December 24th, 1945. Christmas Eve in Fayetteville, West Virginia. The Sodder family home buzzed with holiday excitement. 9 children, ages ranging from 5 to 14, had spent the day preparing for Christmas morning. George Sodder, an Italian immigrant who'd built a successful trucking business, watched his large family with pride. His wife Jenny had prepared their traditional Christmas Eve dinner. Around 10 p.m., the younger children were sent to bed while the older ones stayed up to finish wrapping presents. Maurice, 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, Jenny, 8, and Betty, 5, all headed upstairs to the second-floor bedrooms they shared. George fell asleep in his living room chair around 12:30 a.m. But at 1 a.m., he was jolted awake by the acrid smell of smoke. The house was on fire. George immediately began evacuating his family. He and Jenny managed to get 4 of their children out safely. Marion, 17, George Jr., 16, Sylvia, 13, and baby Jim, 2 years old. But the stairs to the second floor were already engulfed in flames. 5 children were trapped upstairs: Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty. George ran outside to get his ladder, the one he always kept against the house for maintenance work. It wasn't there. Someone had moved it. He sprinted to his trucks, planning to drive one close to the house and climb onto the roof. Neither truck would start, despite both running perfectly the day before. George tried to call the fire department, but the phone lines had been cut. By the time neighbors arrived and the volunteer fire department finally responded, the house was fully engulfed. The fire burned so intensely that by morning, nothing remained but ashes and the stone foundation. When investigators sifted through the debris, they found something that defied explanation. No human remains, no bones, no teeth, no trace of the 5 children who had supposedly perished in the flames. The fire chief quickly concluded the children's bodies had been completely consumed by the intense heat. But George Sodder knew better. He'd worked construction. He understood fire temperatures. Even the hottest house fires, bones and teeth survive. The official investigation lasted less than 2 hours. The case was closed, ruled an electrical fire with 5 fatalities. But for George and Jenny Sodder, the real investigation was just beginning. They hired private investigators, spending their life savings on the search. They put up billboards along major highways, offering a $5,000 reward for information about their children. They followed leads from Florida to California, chasing every tip and sighting. In 1947, they received their first major clue. A traveling salesman told them he'd seen the 5 children in a hotel in Charleston, about 50 miles away, several months after the fire. He claimed the children were with 2 men and 2 women, and that one of the children, a girl, had looked directly at him and mouthed, "Help me." The Sodders contacted the FBI, but agents dismissed the lead as mistaken identity. More sightings followed. A woman in St. Louis claimed she'd served the 5 children breakfast at a truck stop diner. A school administrator in Florida reported seeing children matching their descriptions enrolled under different names. Each lead was investigated, but none provided definitive proof. If you're finding this case as compelling as I am, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more unsolved mysteries that have baffled investigators for decades. The physical evidence at the fire scene continued to trouble experts. In 1949, the Sodders hired a private investigator to re-examine the debris. He found small bone fragments and human vertebrae, which had somehow been missed in the original investigation. They sent the remains to the Smithsonian Institution for analysis. The conclusion was startling. The bones belonged to someone much older than the missing children and had been planted in the debris after the fire. Someone was actively covering up what really happened that Christmas Eve. The Sodders began investigating the events leading up to the fire. They discovered troubling patterns. In October 1945, 2 months before the fire, a man had come to their house trying to sell them life insurance. When George refused, the man made a threatening comment about the beautiful house and how easily something could happen to it. A few weeks before Christmas, George's oldest son Marion had found strange men lurking around their property at night. When confronted, they claimed to be hunting. On Christmas Eve afternoon, the children had played outside, and several neighbors reported seeing an unfamiliar car parked nearby with men inside, watching the Sodder children. The cut phone lines, the missing ladder, the disabled trucks, none of this was random. Someone had systematically eliminated every way the family could call for help or reach the second floor. But why target the Sodder family? George had been outspoken in his criticism of Mussolini's regime in Italy. He'd argued publicly with other Italian Americans in the community who supported fascism. Some investigators theorized the kidnapping was political retaliation. Others believed it was connected to George's business success. He'd built a profitable trucking company in a small town, creating resentment among competitors. The Sodders never stopped searching. In 1967, 22 years after the fire, they received a photograph in the mail. It showed a young man who bore a striking resemblance to their son Louis, who would have been in his 30s by then. On the back was written Louis Sodder, and I love Brother Frankie. The little boys, a 90132. The photograph appeared to have been taken in a school or institutional setting. The Sodders hired investigators to trace its origin, but the lead went nowhere. Jenny Sodder died in 1989, still believing her children were alive. George had passed away in 1969. Before her death, Jenny made her remaining children promise to never stop looking for their siblings. The case has never been officially solved, but modern investigators have uncovered new evidence. In the 1990s, researchers found that the area fire departments had been infiltrated by organized crime families in the 1940s. Some fires were deliberately set as insurance scams or to eliminate witnesses. Advanced forensic analysis of the fire scene has revealed accelerant residue, proving the fire was deliberately set. The burn patterns are inconsistent with electrical failure, supporting the Sodders' longtime belief that their house was intentionally destroyed. DNA testing on the bone fragments found in 1949 confirmed they belonged to someone unrelated to the Sodder family and much older than any of the missing children. Recent investigations have also uncovered evidence of a child trafficking network operating between West Virginia and Florida in the 1940s. Several other families reported suspicious circumstances around missing children during the same time period. In 2020, a deathbed confession in Florida mentioned 5 children taken from a burning house in West Virginia on Christmas Eve 1945. The confessor described details never released to the public, including the fact that the children had been kept together and moved between several locations over the years. The confession named specific locations where the children had been held, but by the time investigators could follow up, all the witnesses had died and the locations had been demolished or sold. Today, 80 years after that Christmas Eve fire, the Sodder children would be in their 80s and 90s if still alive. DNA samples from surviving family members remain on file with the FBI, waiting for a match that may never come. The case remains officially open with the West Virginia State Police. They continue to receive tips and investigate leads, though most now focus on finding living descendants rather than the original victims. The Sodder family search created a template for missing children investigations. Their billboards were among the first to feature photographs of missing children, a practice that would later evolve into the modern Amber Alert system. Their refusal to accept official explanations highlighted the importance of family advocacy in missing persons cases. Today, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children credits the Sodders with pioneering techniques now standard in child recovery efforts. The mystery of what happened to Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty Sodder remains unsolved. But their story serves as a reminder that sometimes the most important investigations are conducted not by authorities, but by families who refuse to give up hope. The billboard the Sodders erected stood along Route 16 for over 40 years, showing photographs of the 5 missing children and offering a reward for information. It was finally removed in the 1990s, not because the family had given up, but because the photographs had faded beyond recognition. But the questions remain. Who cut those phone lines? Who moved that ladder? Who disabled those trucks? And most importantly, what really happened to the 5 Sodder children who vanished on Christmas Eve, 1945? If you're captivated by mysteries that span generations, make sure you're subscribed for more cases where the search for truth never ends. The Sodder family fire reminds us that some questions echo across decades, and that sometimes the most powerful investigations are driven not by badges or authority, but by love that refuses to let go.